Good. Okay. Hello. Good to see people here again. Second of my lessons this week. I did about stem cells earlier, and it is homeostasis today. So hopefully you're all well. Looking forward to school for those people who are coming back to school. Okay. Right. So how have we got some people? Hi, hello, hello. Hello, it's good to see you. All right. Do say where you're from, some of you. If you want to say hello, where you're from, that's always nice to see. I'm good. It's been a busy few days. We're getting ready to do lateral flow tests at school. So it's all interesting. UK, good, hello. I'm ready to do some more, going over some GCSE work. Cameroon, fantastic. I have actually been to Cameroon. Really interesting place. Hello from London. I've been to London as well. I like London. How's London at the moment? Hopefully it's all good. Kuwait, wow. There's some great countries here. So, yeah. So hopefully just give it a few moments and then I will start because it's only just 6 o'clock. So, yeah, and hopefully you're all feeling happy, even though the weather's not great here at the moment. In fact, it's very cold. Milton Keynes. What exam board? We've got various different, this covers, we try to cover all of the exam boards. It's relevant to all of the exam boards. So I will be showing you the syllabus as it comes up anyway, so you can see which parts of the syllabus it covers. Yeah, so homeostasis, nervous system, is found in all of them. Okay, so that's fine, good. Okay, so homeostasis and nervous system is what we're going to be looking at today. Quite a central part of GCSE. Homeostasis being one of those 8 characteristics of life that you probably get fed up of. And hopefully you've got a weekend to look forward to before those in the UK go back into school next week. Get out there and have some time outside, hopefully, as long as you wrap up warm. Hello from Coventry. Coventry, not far from me. Wales, good old Wales. Every time I've been to Wales, it has rained, but I do love Wales. It's absolutely beautiful. So, yeah, we have various different teachers who come on. So you will sometimes have Alex and sometimes me, and we share the work. We have the mocks the first week back, so welcoming. Crikey, that's certainly a way of bringing you back into school, isn't it? We're giving ours a few weeks. So, yeah, we're going to give ours a few weeks before they get mocks, I think. It's been a tough time for a lot of you, so hopefully this is going to be a useful revision topic for you then. Right, so I think we should be just about ready to go. So hopefully I'm going to start sharing my screen with you in just a moment. Now, can you all see my PowerPoint and still hear me okay? Just give me a thumbs up or something in the chat if you can. Yeah, brilliant. So as we go along, do ask questions, answer questions in the chat. Chat's really useful. We can't see the PowerPoint. Can't see the PowerPoint. There might be a little bit of a delay. So I'm hoping you can see it in a minute. No PowerPoint at the moment. Okay. Let me have another look and go back. All right. Let me just a second, bear with me. Always like a nice bit of, here we go. Hopefully you can in a minute. So hopefully you can now see. Can you all see it now? Brilliant. Okay. Don't quite know what the lag was on that one, but we've got it sorted. Always like a little bit of tech to go wrong at the beginning, but we're all sorted now. And welcome to the web class on homeostasis and nervous system. So let me introduce myself to those who haven't met me, and some of you obviously haven't yet because you were asking about Alex. So I'm Philippa, and I've been teaching for over 25 years, and I'm head of biology at my school where I teach full time. I have a bachelor's degree in animal science and a PGC in biology and games, both of which I read at the University of Leeds. I've been teaching and tutoring, like I said, for over 25 years. I've also been an examiner and I've written for various academic publishers. So I'm hoping that my experience is going to help you today. I do love my job and I am really enthusiastic about biology. All right, so hopefully you will enjoy the lessons. Before we start, I just want to talk to you about GCSE Tutoring available. So GCSE Tutoring is a new platform which Snap Revise is just launching. So Snap Revise provides these sessions which we are running on YouTube that you are in today, but there is an extensive platform full of resources for you tailored to the GCSEs and A-levels. We've got loads of new additions, including the GCSE Tutoring platform covering the full curriculum. So we've got classes each week and we cover various different exam boards. So we are going to be, just like with this web class, we're going to be doing different exam classes too, all right? So we're going to be covering all of the exam boards and it's going to be done in a logical way. And there's also some high quality handouts for the PowerPoint slides used in the classes, which are written to help you with your notes and learning. And there's also going to be recordings of previous lessons, which are going to be available to you in case you want to rewatch them, because we've all got topics that we find slightly harder than other ones. So it's always worth going back over them and checking that you fully understand them. All right. There's also going to be some one-to-one support where you can ask questions about specific areas you're not so sure about, which again is really, really useful, a bit like what a sort of revision session that you might have at home, at school. So what exam board are you an examiner for? Well, I've been for OCR and EdXL, and I've done a bit of AQA as well. So I have been an examiner for all of them, and I've written syllabi for Edexcel as well. So I've actually been involved in writing the syllabus for various GCSEs as well. If you are interested and you've enjoyed some of these classes, then there's a free 2-week trial. Just sign up on the website, enter the code at the checkout, and you can claim your trial. You've got nothing to lose, and hopefully you'll have lots of knowledge to gain. So it is worth doing it. Always worth it. So then you can try it out, see what you think. And if you're finding it useful, then that's brilliant. And then you could sign up for it. Okay, so do have a go. So let's look at the lesson today then. So the learning objectives today are to define and explain the purpose of homeostasis, to maintain a constant internal environment, explain how the components of the nervous system can produce a coordinated response, and describe how the structure of the nervous system is adapted to its function. Things that we won't be covering today, but will be covered in future lessons, are synapses, reflexes, the brain and the eyes, and the endocrine system, because we only have a limited time. Hi, you've just joined. You haven't missed too much, but just about how to have 2 weeks, sign up for 2 weeks free of the GCSE Tutoring with Snap Revise. Okay. So to answer some of your questions, I'm going to go through 3 slides quickly, just going to run over them, just to point out that there are specification points for all different exam boards. So there are specification points that I'm not going to read out because basically the specification books are available for you to download off those relevant exam board websites, which is a really good idea. I try to encourage my students to do it all the time because it's really useful for them to have that available to them so that you can use it as you go through the course, looking at the spec as you go along, and during your revision to check off the points to make sure you've covered them and to make sure you don't forget to go over anything. So it's a really good idea. And then you can also highlight them if there's areas that you'd like to go back to. So I think downloading the specs is a really good idea. All right. So let's have a look at what we already know. So what do we already know in biology? So let me just get my pen back. So sorry, just got to get my pen here. It's not letting me get the pen. There we go. Can be a little bit pesky. All right, so what makes up an animal cell? So can we get some answers into that chat to say what makes up animal cells? In other words, what are the parts of an animal cell? What are the organelles found in the animal cell? Brilliant. Excellent. DNA, mitochondria, cell membrane, nucleus, cytoplasm. You've been doing your revision, haven't you? So we've got cell membrane, cytoplasm, mitochondria. Now, what happens in the mitochondria? Just to remind us, can anybody remember what happens in the mitochondria? So mitochondria is the site of cellular respiration. Good, cellular respiration. Then we've got ribosomes. Can anybody remember the importance of the ribosomes? It's just to remind those people that tend to forget the site of protein synthesis. Excellent. Well done, Dana and Evan, etc. Cytoprotein. Yes, lots of you managing to answer that, which is really good. And the nucleus, all right, which obviously contains, as you've already told me, contains chromosomes made up of DNA. And of course, on the DNA are our genes, which make us who we are. So one gene coding for one protein. Brilliant. So what about homeostasis? Thinking about the 8 characteristics of life. Can anybody tell me what the definition of homeostasis is? I mentioned it right at the beginning with the lesson objectives. Regulation of conditions to be optimal for enzymes. Good. So we are going for the regulation of the constant internal environment of a cell or an organism. Maintenance, I can't spell maintenance, of a constant internal environment to optimal conditions. Okay, and that allows for, maintains the organism at the right conditions for it to be able to survive and carry on with all of its metabolic processes. Good. And what can you tell me about the nervous system? Anybody got any idea for the nervous system? What makes up the nervous system? Or what does it do? Nervous system is the system for control and coordination by voluntary, involuntary, and reflex actions. Excellent, Michael. Crikey, you have been doing your revision. Made up, yes, the CNS and the peripheral nervous system. Yeah, CNS and peripheral nervous system, which is abbreviated to PNS, made up of neurons. And it's for control, both voluntary and involuntary. And for some reason, my pen, voluntary, that was meant to say involuntary at the end. It doesn't like writing at the bottom of the page. Involuntary. There we go, it's done now. Sorry about that. Okay, well done. So let's move on to the next part then. So part 1, homeostasis. So let's look at homeostasis in a little bit more detail, shall we? Right. First of all, what conditions does a cell need? So what I want you to look at here are the arrows. So we've got green arrows going in, we've got a black arrow coming out, we've got an arrow sort of going in and out, and we've got an arrow going up and down, and the color of that arrow is significant. All right. So the PNS is the peripheral nervous system. So you've got the central nervous system, which is the inside, which is the brain and central, the spinal cord. And then you've got peripheral nervous system, which are all the nerves that go out from the central nervous system to all the extremities of the body. So that is the peripheral nervous system. Okay, brilliant. So, yeah, peripheral nervous system. PNS is the peripheral nervous system and CNS is the central nervous system. But we will be going into that, so don't worry. All right. So what we've got various arrows here, which are in colour and direction. So I want us to work on those green arrows to start off with. All right. And we've got what goes into the cell. What does that cell need to survive? Who can tell me? Oxygen, good. And what is the oxygen needed for? What do we need oxygen for? Well done, Tamana. Yep. and Hassan, good. For the production of ATP by the process of respiration. Good. Well done. Good answers. Aerobic respiration. Thank you. Of course, you should always put the aerobic respiration in there. So we've got oxygen for aerobic respiration. What else is needed for respiration? And that's for aerobic or anaerobic respiration. There's something else that's needed to go in for respiration. Glucose, excellent, well done. Yeah, Anna and the boss, glucose. Also for respiration. And then other things need to go in. It's not just glucose that goes into a cell. It needs other things. What else apart from glucose? The clue is in glucose. So it's going in from the blood. Water, good, but water also comes out. So we'll put that one over here. Mineral ions, good. Amino acids, good. Yeah, water, ions, mineral ions, yeah, good. So water goes in and out. So we've got water levels over there. And over here, we've got minerals and other nutrients. And those other nutrients include things like amino acids, fatty acids, glycerol, other monosaccharides, such as your galactose, okay, and your fructose. Those will also be moving in from the blood. So they've been picked up from digestion, haven't they? Being carried to the cell so that assimilation can occur. In other words, they can be built up into things that are needed by the cell. Good. So we've got the water levels going in and out. All right, and then we've got this arrow up here, which is red at the top and blue at the bottom to give you a kind of clue for part of it. So maltose, yeah, maltose is a disaccharide. I was just talking about the monosaccharides there. So temperature, good. Temperature needs to be kept, yes, heat. Temperature. So we don't want to get too hot or too cold because, as somebody said earlier on, very important for enzymes to keep this balance correct, isn't it? So we need to keep the enzymes at the right sort of temperature, because otherwise, if it goes too high, they will denature, too low, and the chemical reactions won't be occurring rapidly enough because there won't be enough kinetic energy in those molecules. So therefore, the rate of reaction won't be quick enough, and the organism will not be able to survive. And there's something else that also goes up and down, apart from just temperature. Thinking about what comes out after, if oxygen goes into respiration, what gas comes out? Carbon dioxide comes out, and carbon dioxide dissolves into an acid, can't it? So it can form carbonic acid in the blood. All right, well done, good, well done. So carbonic acid is going to affect the pH. So we have to make sure we maintain the pH of the cell and the blood and the tissue fluid surrounding it. And that's one of the reasons why your breathing rate increases when you exercise, is to get rid of the carbon dioxide, because it's dangerous if the pH drops too much. If the pH drops too much, then again, it can denature the enzymes. So enzymes come up an awful lot. Yes, lactic acid, that's one of the problems with lactic acid, isn't it? In anaerobic respiration, that can alter the pH of the blood and also affect the enzymes again. So we don't want this breakdown of the structure of the enzymes, this denaturation. Okay, so enzymes are really important for making sure that they basically make sure that metabolic reactions can occur inside cells and organisms. So they speed up chemical reactions without being used up themselves. They're like a biological catalyst. So you'll have used catalysts in chemistry. Catalysts speed up reactions. And we need to keep our body temperature about 37 degrees C. So if it's at a relatively low temperature for chemical reactions, we need to speed it up some other way, which is by by using enzymes. Okay, and the other thing that comes out, waste products. Okay, waste products. Well done. So are you all happy with that, hopefully? So these are all really important for making sure the organism can survive okay. So let's move on then. What system regulates these conditions? So have a think, what happens when you get too warm? Say you're in a foreign country, when you can get to one of those, that is, or you've been out for a long run, all right? So you are going to get hot, aren't you? Yeah, the monkey, brilliant. Thermoregulation, fantastic, well done. So we're looking at thermoregulation here, aren't we? We're looking at thermoregulation. So if you get too warm, yes, you sweat, well done. You sweat. Look at this face, that's a bit like me after going for a run. What happens? Okay, good. The hypothalamus is involved. Good. Yeah, so hypothalamus. Yeah, so if you get sweat, you get sweaty, you get flushed, you go red in the face. And this is all to lose heat because the sweating releases heat from evaporation and vasodilation. Good. So we've got an increase in volume of blood being moved to the surface of the skin. So we always have blood vessels in the surface around this, just under the surface of the skin. These dilate and you get a larger volume of blood moving to the surface of, near the surface of the skin. So it's all about the volume of blood moving to the surface of the skin. So you get a greater volume of blood, which allows greater radiation. So we've got evaporation and radiation managing to bring the heat down. All right. If your body gets too cold, some of you have already got it. Yes, your erector muscles relax. Good. So your hairs lie flat, so you're not trapping air around your body. Excellent. And somebody was talking about shivering. Good. When you get too cold, you shiver, you go paler because a lower, paler. Let me try spelling paler. There we go. Because a lower volume of blood is going towards the surface of your skin, so you go paler. Your extremities go cold because a lower volume of blood is moving to the extremities. And this keeps you warmer because what it's doing is it's keeping the blood closer to the core of your body, all right? Keeping the organs warm. Good. And erector muscles contract. Yes, your hairs stand on end. Hairs stand on end because your erector muscles make your hairs stand on end. You get those goosebumps, and that's to trap air around your body. All right. The most important thing with the movement of the blood, the vasodilation, vasoconstriction, it depends on the example, but the most important bit is about the volume of blood. So when we get hot, a greater volume of blood is moving towards the surface of the skin. When we're cold, a smaller volume is a lower volume. The hypothalamus thing we will talk about later. The hypothalamus is part of the brain which detects changes in temperature. All right, so it's a part of the brain which detects body temperature. Okay, yeah, you're talking about shunting arterioles, aren't you, Eliza? Good. So homeostasis, as we mentioned before, is the regulation of a stable internal environment to maintain optimum levels. And this was just one example of thermoregulation. Okay. Yeah. The shunt vessels, Eliza, yes, we can talk about the shunting of the blood away from the surface. So you're shunting more of the blood back into the inner part of your body. Well done. All right. So let's move on. How are these conditions regulated? So homeostasis involves an automatic control systems. It'd be a bit rubbish if we had to remember what to do for all of these different things. All right. So we cannot possibly remember to do these things. They have to be automatic. So involuntary control. And this is under both we've got nervous control and chemical control. And there's going to be more on hormones in a later web class, all right? So these nervous hormonal, the nervous and hormonal or endocrine systems work together to control the body. And you need to know the differences between these two systems. So, for example, if somebody jumps out on you from behind a door, what happens? Well, this nervous system makes you jump backwards, doesn't it? Because you're scared and you're jumping backwards, and it just gives you a few more seconds or fractions of seconds to get away from whatever it is that is attacking you. But then afterwards, you get shaky hands, don't you? And you may go a bit pale. And this is response to adrenaline. And adrenaline is a hormone. All right. So we've got the nervous system, which was the rapid response. Okay, it was very quick, wasn't it? If somebody jumps out of you, yes, from the adrenal gland. So adrenaline comes from the adrenal gland. And the nervous control, some of the examples mention adrenaline. Adrenaline will speed up your heart rate and brings about sort of the shaky responses and increased breathing rate, etc. So there's nervous control and there's hormonal control. So with the nervous control, it was fast, wasn't it? It was fast because you jumped backwards. Fast signals and responses. Whereas the hormonal control was slower, but it has a longer lasting effect. Yep, the adrenal glands are near the kidneys. They lie just on top of the kidneys. Yeah, so with the hormonal control, so I was just giving an example of nervous and hormonal, all right? So nervous control is a quick response, all right? So a nervous control is a quick response, and a hormonal control takes longer because it relies on releasing hormones into the blood, and then those hormones being carried all around the body until they reach the target cells or the organs, all right? So they take longer because they've got to go via the blood, and that takes longer. Whereas the nervous system is much quicker because it relies on electrical impulses which go along neurons. Floss, can you explain what the difference is between a nervous control and so Floss, you were asking about what bit did you need explaining again? The nervous and hormonal control? So do just jot down in the chat what it is that you need explaining again. So with the nervous control, it's a much faster response. So it gives you a quick response, and then it works really nicely with the endocrine gland, because the endocrine gland releases hormones into the blood, which are then carried all around the body to the target cells. So it takes longer, but it lasts longer. So that keeps the response going on. Yeah. So this relies on specialized nervous cells, neurons. So it has specialized nervous cells. And it's coordinated by the central nervous system, which is the brain and spinal cord. Whereas with the hormonal control, what are the chemical signals in the endocrine gland? Is endocrine just hormonal? Yes. Endocrine and hormonal are the same thing. So hormonal control uses hormones, which are chemical signals. And they're released into the blood. All right. So it's carried, these are carried in the blood. So it takes longer for the response to occur, but it will last for longer. And sometimes it lasts for years, such as growth hormone. All right. Now, impulses are how the information passes down the nervous system. So it's known as electrical impulses, okay? So that's how it passes down the nervous system, all right, by what are known as electrical impulses. Electrical impulses, which is all to do with changes in charge, but it's just electrical impulses, okay? And those are how it's so much quicker. If you think about electricity passing along a wire and something passing down a river, there's much difference in speed, isn't there? And that's the same kind of idea, all right? Are there any other questions from that part? Okay. Action potential. Electrical impulses can also be called an action potential. Yeah, okay. Right. We're going to be moving on to receptor cells. That's what we're going to be talking about, okay? We will mention receptor cells. So how are these conditions regulated? So we've got to be able to actually respond to this temperature, this change in temperature. But first of all, we have to know, you have a question, go on, Mark. So we have to know about this change, all right? So how are these conditions regulated? Well, we've got to be able to detect the change in the conditions in the first place, all right? So something has to detect the change in the environment. So that's the first thing that they both need. Something to detect the change. Whether that's going to be a change in pH, whether it's a change in water concentration, whether it's a change in temperature. And it was mentioned earlier, yes, the receptors detect the stimulus. So a receptor, and you've mentioned stimulus. Well, stimulus is the change in the environment, isn't it? So that's what a stimulus is. It's a change in the environment. So those are receptors. So we have receptors which receive information about that change in the environment. All right. What else does this diagram suggest? So we've had the detecting the changes. What's this bit, do you think, is going on here? What do you think is going to be happening here? I will be talking about negative feedback at a later stage, all right? So we've got the receptors which detect pH or blood or whatever. And then in the central nervous system. So here we have a central nervous system. We need something which coordinates, in other words, receives and processes the information from the receptors. So these are coordination centers, such as your brain, your spinal cord, endocrine glands. These receive and process information from receptors. Okay, so yep, some of you are jumping far ahead. All right, talking about other parts which are involved in this. So we've got the pituitary gland, the hypothalamus. These are all correct. All right. So we've got this coordination centers, haven't we? So we're putting it in general that there's coordination coordination centers. And yes, Mark, effectors. We're going to be talking about effectors next, because we need then, once we've detected the change, we've received that information and processed it, we then need to send some information out for a response to occur. And the thing that carries out that response is the effector, isn't it? So we need something that carries out the response. In other words, it's known as an effector. So effectors are basically muscles and glands. Okay, so effectors produce a response. So we have a change in the environment, a stimulus. This is received by the receptor. That information is passed to a coordinator center, and that coordinator center then sends information out to the effector to tell it what to do in response. Happy with that? All right. So, are we going to do some exam questions? Do we feel ready to try some? Yes, stimulus, receptor. So you go stimulus, receptor, coordinator, effector, response. We're going to be coming on to the different types of neurons at a later stage. Don't worry. Okay. Yeah, we're all ready. Nisha, we will hopefully help you with that. Yeah, good. Let's go on then to some questions, some exam questions. So let's look at this first exam question. This one is from OCR, the old spec. Let's look at this one. The maintenance, so the control of blood glucose is a very important aspect of homeostasis. So we're looking at blood glucose and homeostasis. Explain what is meant by the term homeostasis. Okay, so we've said this several times, haven't we? What are the importance? We're looking for two marks here. All right, so we're looking for 2 marks. What do we think we're going to be going for? So for the 2 marks, we need that first part, don't we? Maintenance of a constant internal. Yeah, brilliant. So you're getting it, brilliant. So that's the 1 mark, isn't it? And then within a narrow range or a set point. Yeah, so we've got to maintain a stable environment, good, and it's around for optimum conditions. Or within a narrow range. For 1 mark, all right. And that's despite the changes in the environment. All right, and that would be another mark. So you could get 2 maximum marks for that. Happy with that? Right. So you can't mention it. There's no point in mentioning anything about negative feedback in there. They'll just ignore it because they're asking for a definition of homeostasis. All right. Good. This is really good. Well done. So now we've looked at what homeostasis is, let's have a move on to the next part of the class, which is looking at the nervous system. All right. So we've already mentioned this, which is why I didn't go into too much detail. Negative feedback we will cover at another stage, don't worry. All right. So what makes up the nervous system? So I mentioned earlier the central nervous system, didn't I? And I also mentioned earlier the peripheral nervous system. Peripheral, that word peripheral means around the outside. And central obviously means in the core. Brilliant. Well done, Dana. The brain and spinal cord is the central nervous system because they're in the center of the organism. Good. Brain and spinal cord. Brilliant. And the peripheral nervous system are all the nerves that basically, yes, well done, carry out the information to or from the central nervous system. So they're all the nerves that branch off from the spinal cord. So they're the ones that branch off the central nervous system to all the parts of the body, including your big toe. All right, so they go absolutely everything. The PNS are basically all of the other nerves. All right, so they're branching off from the central nervous system. And they've got many links. So we've got many different sensory receptors, such as pressure receptors, temperature receptors, chemical receptors detecting pH, temperature receptors detecting temperature inside the body and surrounding the body, and pressure such as blood pressure or pressure when you touch something. All right. And so the central nervous system then coordinates these peripheral nerves. So the nervous system basically enables humans to react to their surroundings and to coordinate their behavior. All right. So I would love to answer all the questions that are coming up, but otherwise I wouldn't be able to go through the basics before I manage to build on some of the more complicated questions that some people are putting in there, which is why I say I will cover them, but it's going to have to be a little bit later. So I can just do the foundations to start off with, and then we can build on top of them. All right. So let's move on then. Coordination by the nervous system. So we're going to have a look. This is building up on what we were talking about earlier at that earlier diagram where we came up with that something has to receive the change in the environment, the stimulus, something has to coordinate it, and then something has to bring out the response. Yeah. Okay. So we have to have a think about when we start off with the stimulus. All right. So we start off with the stimulus, and that's the change in the environment, isn't it? That's the change in the environment, the stimulus. So the stimulus is that change in the environment. That's the thing that we have to respond to, otherwise the cells will die. So information from the stimulus is received by, yes, brilliant, the receptor cells. So we've got receptors here. So we've got the stimulus, then the receptors. So the receptors receive that stimulus and convert it into electrical impulses or action potentials, whichever you wanted to call it. And they get passed along, the information gets passed along, and we mentioned neurons earlier. Does anybody know what type of neurons lead from the receptors to the central nervous? Brilliant, the sensory neurons, because they're coming from sense organs, aren't they, which are picking up these changes. So sensory neurons are taking that information from the receptors, Brilliant. Yeah, the boss has got it. So sensory neurons, and then they go into the central nervous system. Now, these neurons pass the information from the sensory neurons to the next neurons. So they are known as, does anybody know, different boards call them slightly different things, but they are relay neurons. The relay neurons, because they're relaying, like in a relay race, when you pass a baton on, the relay neurons pass the information from the sensory neurons to the, and they're all saying it, to the motor neurons, because motor neurons, I always think about motors drive something. So the motor neurons drive the response. We've had the receptors are receiving the change in the stimulus. They're passing the information along the sensory neurons. The relay neurons transfer that information from the sensory neurons to the motor neurons. So they're relaying it like in a relay race, passing on your baton. And then the motor neurons drive the response. Okay, so motor neurons. And then we know the last one, we talked about it. So what is the last one that brings about a response? It's either a muscle or a gland. It brings about the response. Yeah, brilliant. Effectors. And these are either muscles or glands. And how my students like to remember it is SRSRMER, because it kind of rhymes, SRSRMER. So it goes stimulus, receptors, sensory neurons, relay neurons, motor neurons, effectors, response, SRSRMER. All right. So that's how I like to remember it. So information, therefore, is passed along from the stimulus through the receptor, through the sensory neuron, through the relay neuron, through the motor neurons to bring about the response from the effector. So what type of things are controlled by the nervous system? And there's all sorts of things. It's not just in homeostasis. What type of things are brought about by the nervous system? The relay neurons are within the central nervous system. They're not the part of the central nervous system. They're found within the central nervous system. So SRSRMER brings about, that's the reflex arc. Yes, a reflex arc is a response to something. Good. Okay. So we've already talked about the fact that homeostasis is controlled by nervous response. What other things apart from homeostasis is controlled by nervous things? Movement, excellent. Movement, skeletal movement. So you're going and playing hockey or whatever. Yep, great. Thinking about when you're exercising. All right, so think about when you're exercising, what increases when you exercise? So, right. So vision, good. We've got vision, we've got heart rate. We've got body temperature, which is part of the homeostasis, and breathing rate, yeah, which are also bring about partly the homeostasis as well. Body temperature, good. Yeah, vision, and yeah, all sorts of things, and blood pressure. Yeah, good. So these are all brought about by nervous responses. Okay, let's have a look how we're doing. So moving on then, just keeping an eye on the time here. Some of you were asking about nerves. All right, so here is a nerve, and this is a diagram of a nerve. This is the nerve here. And for nerves to work, they have to have a supply, their own supply, because they're living cells. So they have to have their own blood supply, good osmoregulation. Pain, yeah, detected by the neurons. Good. Okay, internal organ functions, excellent. Those are all really good. Adrenaline release, excellent. All examples of what neurons are used for. Okay, the nervous system. So this is a nerve. These here, a nerve is a living cell, so it needs its own supply of oxygen and glucose because they are very active, so they need to carry out respiration, all right? So they need their own blood vessels. So nerves are made of, they have to have their own supply of blood to give them oxygen and glucose for respiration so that they can respire and release ATP. Nerves are also made from bundles of neurons. So this is a bundle of neurons. So the nerve itself is the overall, it's a bit like an electric wire, and inside your electric wire are lots of little tiny fine wires. Those fine wires are your neurons. So each individual neuron or nerve cell, all right, carries its own electrical impulse along it, all right? So this in the middle is the long thin bit of one cell, which is known as an axon. So this is an individual axon. It will all come clear on the next one because I can explain what they look like. And the only reason I'm introducing this is so that we can talk about the different types of neurons that we talked about. Sensory neurons, relay neurons, and motor neurons. Brilliant, well done. And around the outside is a myelin sheath, because you've got to think of it like an electrical wire going to a plug. My brilliant drawing of a plug. All right. If you didn't have a plastic coating around it, that electricity could be passed on to something else like you and give you an electric shock. And that's not where it wants to go. That's not an efficient way of getting the electricity along the wire. So we need that electricity to go along the wire. So to make sure that the electricity goes along the wire, it has to be covered with a plastic coating. That's the same as a myelin sheath along our neurons. It is an insulator. Good. It acts as an insulator. So it stops the electrical impulse moving sideways to other cells. It makes sure it just goes in one direction. So it's really quick. In fact, it's so quick, it can travel at 120 meters a second. In other words, 250 miles an hour, which is very, very quick. All right. So it's an electrical insulator. Yep, good. So it's just like the plastic coating around the outside of a wire leading from a plug, all right? And the whole point of your neurons having this myelin sheath around the outside, this electrical insulator, is to make sure that that electrical impulse goes very quickly directly to where it's needed so that you can have a really quick response and you can survive, because the whole point is about you surviving, okay? Yeah, it allows the action potential to travel faster. Brilliant. So we've mentioned about the 3 types of neurons, and we mentioned that we have a sensory neuron, a relay neuron, which is the central one, and the motor one, all right? So this is going, the electrical impulse is coming from the stimulus here, from the receptor. And it's moving along through the central nervous system and then off to the effector, which is this end. So what is this cell here? The one that is on the first on the left. So that is a sensory neuron. Brilliant. A sensory neuron. Then you've got the relay neuron in the middle, and then at the end we have the one that drives the response. So whatever drives the response is the motor neuron. Good, well done. Okay, so And that's what causes muscles to contract, glands to release hormones. All right. So let's have a look at the difference in structure between the three. So you need to be able to recognize the different ones. So here's a sensory neuron, here's a relay neuron, and here's a motor neuron. What I want you to do is that the main part of the cell is the bit that bulges outwards, because that's the bit that has all the organelles in it. All right. So all the organelles are found in the main part, the main body of the cell. And it's the main body of the cell. So this is the cell body. And that's where all the organelles are found, all the main organelles are found. Right, the relay neuron is just to carry the information from sensory neurons to relay neurons, and it allows for lots of neurons to join up. All right, yeah, the cell body, good. So this is the cell body. The axon I was talking about before, which has this fatty sheath around the outside to insulate it. The main axon, okay, is this long part here. All right, so we've got an axon here, an axon here, an axon here, and that leads from the cell body. So here's your cell body, and the axon is leading away from the cell body. All right, and then at the other, here's your myelin sheath. Can you see how it's like this is a fatty layer around the axon? So this is the myelin sheath, which is the electrical insulator, which allows for the electrical impulses to move really quickly. And then at this end, does anybody know what these are called? Good, yes, well done, Tamana. These are dendrites. The dendrites or dendrons, because the dendrons are the larger parts, the dendrites, the smaller parts. They are the bits that lead towards the cell body. So they lead to the cell body. So they carry the electrical impulse to the cell body, and the axon carries away from the cell body. Axon away, carries away from the cell body. So A for away, axon away, all right? So the other thing you will notice between them is the motor neuron. I always think sort of looks a little bit like Mr. Sneezy, if you've ever seen Mr. Sneezy, who looks like this, all right, with his big nose in the middle, all right, and then he stands up here. All right, that's Mr. Sneezy. So this looks like Mr. Sneezy. It's got the cell body at one end and nearest the central nervous system. The relay neuron can have multiple dendrons and dendrites coming out of it, so it allows for connecting up, all right? And the sensory neuron, the cell body's roughly about in the middle. All right, so the cell body of the sensory neuron is roughly around in the middle. And so if you need to recognize the difference, then that's the way to remember them. Some exam boards only expect you to know the structure of the motor neuron. So let's have a look at this then. How confident are you feeling? Have you got any questions for me? I know it's relatively basic what we've gone through so far, but have you got any questions for me? Are you all happy? Good, ready to go on? Let's have a look at this question then. So this is from EdXL. Draw an arrow in the box to show the direction of travel of the electrical impulse in this motor neuron. So which one is this? Well, it's the one that looks like Mr. Sneezy. All right, so Mr. Sneezy, Mr. Sneezy is motor neuron. So which way is the arrow going to go? To the left or towards the right? Yeah, brilliant, to the right. And which letter labels the dendron in this motor neuron? Remember, the axon goes away from the cell body. So yeah, it is A. All right. And you'd obviously put a cross to it in an exam because it asks for a cross. So let's have a look at this. This is from OCR. Following the detection of a stimulus, sensory and motor neurons coordinate the body's response to the stimulus. State one way in which the structure of a motor neuron differs from that of a sensory neuron. All right. So we've just done this, haven't we? What was the differences between them? Now, when we have to explain a difference, we have to say what it is in the motor neuron and what it is in the sensory neuron. You can't just give what it is for one of them. Motor neurons have a larger cell body. Motor doesn't have a dendron. Yeah, well, they have very short dendrons and dendrites, but they have a much longer part leading away. So so we're talking about motor neurons and sensory neurons. So the motor neuron has a long axon. So longer, I should say, because it's comparing it, longer axon. No dendron, so it's dendrites really. So the longer axon on the motor neuron. And so the cell body is at the end of the motor neuron. So longer axon on the motor neuron, shorter on the sensory and the sensory has a long dendron. And with the motor neuron, or you could say the motor neuron, which I think is easier, cell body at end, and sensory neuron in the middle. And then we've got the function of a motor neuron. How does that differ to a sensory neuron? So this is all about where the impulses are carried to. Yeah, good. So with the motor neuron, carries impulses from the central nervous system to the effector. Good. So motor carries impulses from CNS to effector, and sensory carries them from the receptor to the central nervous system. Well done. Good. Yeah, excellent. Or you could say to the muscle or gland. Good. And then we should see the last one. Have we got time for this last one? No, we haven't. We need to finish off there, I'm afraid. So we should know now, define and explain the purpose of homeostasis, explain how the components of the nervous system can produce a coordinated response, and describe how the structure of the nervous system is adapted to its function. And I'm really sorry that we haven't got time for any more. All right, everybody. So hopefully I'll see you at the next web class. I'm going to be covering synapses and reflexes, which is why I didn't go into all the detail on them today. All right. So hopefully I will see you again soon. All right, brilliant. I'm glad it helped you. All right then. Bye-bye. Thank you.